Okay, now the next thing, which is the terms and conditions. This is a standard, usually 1 or 2 pages, that goes out with every BEO, and it is full of a bunch of legal fine print, if you will. Yes, contracts and forms. Are we having fun yet? Anyways, okay, so standard terms and conditions basically goes out to let the company know basically of the cancellations policies, some other areas that they need to be aware of, because they are all parts that can affect the revenue or the payment of a function. And of course, there's some legal clauses this year as well. So we're just going to go through a couple of them more in detail, but I'll scan through this one as an example. So, of course, the first one is the taxes. We need to know, everybody needs to know that they have to pay taxes. This is something that's obvious to us, but in obviously some countries, taxes are different or non-existent, as in Alberta, who doesn't have the PST portion. And so we need to make sure that they know that there's taxes to add to it. So the second section here is the guaranteed. This is something that is part of, that I mentioned at the BEO with the guaranteed numbers, and this is probably one of the biggest sections of a terms and conditions. So the first part is the guaranteed. So like I said, the guaranteed number is how many people that the hotel or venue will set for and prepare food for. So 48 hours in advance, the catering source will call the client and find out the exact number of people that are planning to be in there. So that they can prepare properly and set properly. So a couple of little sub-conditions to this is in Part B here. The company is not required to serve more than 5% increase in persons above the guaranteed specified in advance by the patron. What happens sometimes is a meeting planner may not know their numbers, and so if they're having a function for 120 people, then they turn around and say, no, you know what, we're only going to have 100 people there. No problem. We guarantee and set for 100 people plus 5%. We'll make meals for that as well. If 120, 130 people show up, then we'll try our best to accommodate them, of course, because we're a service industry, but we are not required to necessarily have the space or the food available for them, simply because they didn't guarantee the numbers. They had more people show up than we expected. So they can't hold us faultless for that, or they can't hold us faulty for that. So this, again, like I said, we try to, but we try our you got to make sure guaranteed numbers are as accurate as possible. The other thing you have to remember with the guaranteed number is the number of people end up that being charged. So if, for example, you say, okay, I guarantee 100 people at my dinner, and 110 people show up, we'll accommodate them, we'll give them meals as much as possible, you will pay for 110 people because that's how many people show up. However, if you guarantee 100 people and only 80 people show up, you will be charged for 100 people because that's what we expected in revenue, that's what we planned for, and chances are that's what we cooked for as well. So it's really important to know that with the guaranteed number, the meeting planner or the client is charged for the guaranteed number, or if it's above, then above. If it's below, then it's the guaranteed number. I hope that made sense. Okay, and then the C part is the deposit amount. Often a deposit is required, especially if you're booking a wedding. Those brides need to pay. So a deposit is required, and then it's non-refundable, and it goes towards the final bill as well. If the hotel is able to rebook any space from any cancellations, then there is a administration charge, the deposit is kept, and they will try to negate the rest of the charges. But that happens few and far between. You know, I've heard tons of stories where the bride has canceled. My cousin actually was engaged and booked and everything, and the wedding was called off about a month prior to. So she lost thousands of dollars just because she could no longer forfeit the deposit and the money she had put down for her wedding. So if we move down, so we have payment in advance. This basically just says you have to pay everything up front unless you have a credit, some kind of credit application agreed with us. So that's basically that section. For banquet personnel, this is to say that you have to pay for extra banquet personnel if we need to, and as well the service charges. So we have a service charge, for example, of 17% here. Gratuities in hotels and venues is often 18 to 20% these days, not the common 15% we see in restaurants. And it's automatically added to the bill. There is something called a price increase. This is if something is being booked more than a year in advance. The company has the right to change the prices to some degree, but not anything stupid, basically. They have to make reasonable substitutions, etc., if the prices change. Excused non-performance. This is your force majeure indemnity kind of clause, and basically it is your acts of God clause, I call it. So in case anything happened, if there is a union strike, any kind of government issue, acts of terrorism, etc., then you can't hold the hotel or venue liable for what didn't happen. Harley, this is particularly important for you simply because you're putting in festivals and events, and although you may not go through a terms and conditions or a BEO, this sort of acts of God section is particularly important simply because those kinds of things like bad weather, crowd issues, those government regulations, etc., I'm thinking of Boots and Hearts. There's a lot of issues with that. So this is an important clause to note. Provisions of food and beverages, of course. No food and beverages are allowed on company property. You can only have the food and beverage. This is a liability issue. If somebody if the client's brought in food and beverage from an outside source and somebody gets sick, it's a liability on the hotel, and you are not allowed to do that. Conduct of event, of course, if anybody is misbehaving, they get kicked out. Displays and decorations, we just basically don't want tape on the wall to ruin our lovely walls, so they have to be all approved. Company responsible for loss damage to patrons' property. Basically, we're saying, hey, once your boxes are on site, it's your problem, not ours. Security, if you need extra security, the client has to provide that and pay for that. Overtime clause, should your event run later than the 1 hour sort of maximum, then overtime labor charges will be passed on to the patron. So if you have a gala dinner and it's supposed to end at 1 o'clock, that's why if you've ever gone to a gala dinner, you feel like the lights come on and you feel like rushed out at 1 o'clock. And that's because the client has 1 hour to clean up and get their stuff out, basically. If they take longer than that, then they have to start paying overtime charges to all the staff there. So if your gala event ends at 1 a.m. in the morning, you want everything to shut down by 1 o'clock so you can clean up and get out of there. You can't linger and mingle no matter how good a time you're having. Substitution of space. The company, in case, does have reserves the right to substitute space. Very important to note if you're a meeting planner, because you could guarantee some space, and if for some reason we need to change it, we have the right to do so, as long as it's the same stuff. Limit of liability, of course, is limited just to the contract price. And company's right to terminate. This basically says that the venue or the hotel has the right to make this agreement null and void for some reason, for whatever reason, if they have a legal right to. And then, of course, the standard terms and conditions needs to get signed off by the client or the representative. It can be the meeting planner, but often the meeting planner will pass this on to the client to sign off on. So those goes along with the banquet event order.